Ay, ang ating yung confirmation mo. Kasi that's our ship. We're on the line right now. Nice. That's the boat. Yan ang aming cruise. Sama na kami dyan sa aming anniversary date. Sa cruise. 7th year anniversary. Meron kami lunch date dyan sa cruise. With the nice weather at the Lake Tahoe. The Lake Tahoe.
Some 1.4 million tons to supply the needs of a city of 3 million people. That's what's lost through evaporation each day, and it's barely noticed. East. This first version of Lake Tahoe was a broad valley that was open to the north. That opening was closed some 2 million years ago with the explosion of Mount Pluto, a volcano on the north shore. When Mount Pluto exploded, the lava flow and debris closed the north end of the valley and created a true lake. The final step in the lake's creation happened about 25,000 to 11,000 years ago as glaciers came through the area down to a depth of about 75 feet. This purity and the lake's depth combined to create the colors of Lake Tahoe. The lake acts like a giant reflecting prism, and in the deeper portions of the lake reflects the entire spectrum of light. So when the sky is a bright blue, the lake takes on the color. On cloudy days, the lake will take on Ladies and gentlemen, we are now coming into Emerald Bay. The point on the left is Eagle Point, so named because of the eagles that nest there in the spring. On the right, Emerald Point. Historically, Emerald Point was also a summer lodging site used by the Washoe Indian tribe. From this vantage point, I'd like to describe the proportions of the magnificent scenery that will soon surround us. The peaks of the Sierra, seeming to ring the bay, are well over 9,000 feet. The level of Lake Tahoe is maintained at an average of approximately 6,220 feet, and so we have a spectacular 3,000-foot granite backdrop to this alpine bay. As those peaks rise above us, so does the bottom of the lake rise beneath us. As we enter the bay, looking over the side, you'll notice a change in color of the water as we leave the indigo blue of the over 1,000-foot depths and enter the light green waters of the bay's entrance, where for a few moments we will have only 4 or 5 feet of water under our keel. Emerald Bay and the valley ahead and above between the two peaks are classic examples of glacial movement, being distinctly U-shaped rather than the V-shaped valleys made by erosion. Glaciers came down through here, gouging and scraping off the sides of mountains and digging out the bay. On the mountainsides ahead, you'll notice lateral scars, gigantic scratches made by massive boulders locked in the ice as it inched its way towards the lake. And that almost shiny appearance on the rock face was also caused by the ice. It's called glacial polish. Looking over on the left, the ridge of land that starts at Eagle Point and rises to meet the mountains is known as a moraine. A glacial moraine is formed by debris, rock, mud, and boulders that the glacier picks up and drops to one side as it moves along. Just to the south of that ridge is Cascade Lake, and further south, Fallen Leaf Lake. They, like Emerald Bay, were formed by glaciers. Had the glacier that formed this bay been less active, had it done less in its power of gouging and scraping, had it not done the job that it did, Emerald Bay would be a lake. Once again, looking ahead just to the left, you'll notice a large tent-shaped scar on the side of the mountain, a slide area brought about by both man and nature. In 1913, the first road to Emerald Bay was blasted out of the side of that mountain. Some 13 years later, in 1926, a rock slide closed the road for a short time. But in 1955, on Christmas Eve, Mother Nature let go, and in an instant, a tremendous 600-foot avalanche had obliterated the road. It took more than a year to blast out a new roadway, and to this day, local people still don't completely trust the surface tension of that rock face and tend to drive past the area in a hurry. By the way, that slide area is on the lower part of one of Maggie's Peaks, named after the daughter of a previous landowner here in Emerald Bay. Or they can sleep before their boat. They're allowed to stay 7 days. And deposited here by the glacier. However it happened, its beauty and solitude helps make Emerald Bay one of the most photographed bodies of water in the world. As we come closer to the island, you'll notice a stone structure at its summit called the Tea House. Be most appropriate. Mrs. Knight and her designer architect went to Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland to study the Scandinavian architecture of old churches, homes, and castles. Structures dating back 1,200 years that would be faithfully reproduced in the building of Mrs. Knight's Castle in the Sky. Nearly 200 strong, carpenters, craftsmen, and laborers setting up camp at the construction site. The stones used in the castle were carved from the canyon in back of the house, and other building materials were. The corner is a turret, or the South Tower, which is a library. On the floor of that library is a round, hand-woven cashmere rug, valued then at $30,000. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, the famous came to visited Vikings' home to while away the summer as guests of Mrs. Knight. Among them were Will Rogers and Charles Lindbergh. Mrs. Knight is said to have helped Lindy finance his historic flight across the Atlantic.
Dito tayo sa ano, sa other side. Go back to other side.
A small bay where several times each summer Mrs. Knight would have a servant row her and her guests, then assist them up the path of stone stairs to the tea house, a 16-foot square stone structure with miniature fireplace, 4 windows, table, and chairs. A light lunch and tea with high society chit-chat helped pass a summer afternoon. Such was the life of the idle rich at Lake Tahoe in days long gone. Sadly, weather, neglect, and vandalism have left only the stone walls of Mrs. Knight's tea house standing. Another interesting personality of Hampton Bay was a gentleman by the name of Captain Richard Barber. A retired British seaman signed on. Features that have been submerged for thousands of years. Ancient forests, sunken boats, and the famous steamer Tahoe. Unusual formations locked away from view since Tahoe was created some 3 million years ago. Come with us now as we explore against the bright blue sunlighted surface. How many years have pleasure boats and water skiers passed overhead? Never knowing that 2 miles out from shore, this magnificent treasure lay hidden just below the waterline. As we continued our descent, the rock alternated back and forth from sheer vertical cliffs into small hanging ledges. And if this canyon was still above water, it would have been set aside as a
safe.